What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to UAP Tuesdays. This is a special one. This is an interview I've been wanting to get for a long time. And if you follow the Down to Earth with Kristian Harloff channel, you saw a little while ago we did this report when Avi Loeb came out and had this potential theory of the idea that he believes that it's possible that whatever these things are flying around the sky could be jumping from portal to portal, whatever it might be, anti-gravity, those types of things. And that fascinated me all in itself. So I had an opportunity to speak to Avi Loeb, and I asked him about this. I asked him about, a lot of different things. We talk about some of the stuff that he has in his possession, if he's going to look for more of it, if he knows the location of where to actually look, the Gallileo Project in general and what they are doing, if the FBI came and visited them about what they were doing. We got into a lot of it. There was a lot of great conversation here with me and Avi Loeb. So if you're interested in this conversation and you're interested in more conversations about this topic, this is where I just ask questions, man. And I just try to find out what the hell's going on. And I ask people who are involved in it, as I'm just kind of recently discovering it. So if you're brand new to the channel, subscribe to the channel, help us out. We're approaching 150,000 subscribers, trying to do that and trying to get to 200 pretty quick, but we hope that you will join us on the journey. Share this, post clips on Twitter, do all of that, let people know. If you want to watch me talk about this particular subject every day from Monday through Friday, then join me on the Down to Earth with Kristian Harloff channel. That's where I dive into this Monday through Friday. So enjoy this episode. I appreciate it. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are found. And before we even do it, check this out. All right, guys, let's talk about AG1. You guys know I love AG1. If you've been listening to my show, you've heard me talk about them, and I've been drinking them for about 2 years now, and I love it. Never been a vitamins guy. I've told you that. I take it all one shot, AG1. I put it in a water bottle. I shake it up. I'm good to go. I recommend AG1 to my friends. I recommend AG1 to my family. Everybody. AG1 is a team of doctors and scientists. It is tested for 950 contaminants and NSF certified for sport. It is formulated based on the latest science and maintains high quality standards. You guys know they've been with us for a while because you guys know too. You've all been checking them out, and everybody who's been signing up to AG1 says the same thing. It's changed your energy. It's changed how you approach things in the day. You're smiling more. You're running around the place, and you're sleeping better. I know. AG1 is the supplement that I trust to provide the support my body needs daily, and that's why they've been a partner for so long. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and you get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/bigthing. drinkag1.com/bigthing. Check it out. Let me tell you about Mack Weldon. Okay, so Mack Weldon in general, it is a really, really wonderful company. Because a lot of times you want something both ways, right? Me, you know that I lost weight, but I can't lose weight and keep firing down pizza. Can't do it. Because we always think that looking sharp means that you got to have the starchy, the Oxfords and the stiff chinos rather than the effortless comfort. It is possible to have it both ways. They have light as air underwear to innovative anti-odor tees and versatile yet comfortable pants. It is so great what Mack Weldon is doing. They have a full range of clothes. And I'm telling you, browse this site. You're going to lose your minds. It's the best. I got, I'm always looking for the essentials in just like socks and underwear. And man, I got it. But then he sent me these pants. I have like, the t-shirts are so smooth. I wear them I'm just comfortably around the house, but I can also, if I'm going, I put on like a suit jacket the other day and I put it on with it. And then the pants, they fit perfectly. And I had some really comfortable sweatpants. Oh, really great. Okay, now peacocking. You guys are peacocking? That's for the birds. Now, some guys, you just want to go out there, you want to look good without calling attention to yourselves. Well, Mack Weldon Apparel gives you understated good looks for understated confidence. It's not flashy, just classic, always in style, and made from the world's most comfortable performance materials. What that means usually, the performance fabric, usually means that clothes that look or feel techy or shiny, well, these are designed to fit your style and demands of modern life. So I just I can't even tell you, like, this underwear is really comfortable. The sweatpants for me, I was wearing them the other day, and I just like I like ones that just feel like I could go out, whether I'm just walking the dog, but I don't feel like, oh my God, people are looking at me. What am I wearing right now? We're just walking around the house in this, but it's stylish, man. I love it. Get timeless looks with modern comfort from Mack Weldon, but you got to go to MackWeldon.com. You can get 20% off, which is pretty great, off your first order, but you got to use that code Big Thing. So head on over to MackWeldon.com and use that code Big Thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to introduce my next guest. As you saw in the thumbnail, as you saw in the description of the video, I've been talking about having this gentleman on for quite a bit. Since I've discovered this topic, since I've been talking about this, since you guys have been here, I kept hearing the name of Avi Loeb. And he is the professor of science at Harvard University. He has been the director of the Institute for Theory and Computation at the Center for Astrophysics. And there's a lot of amazing stories that I've heard with Avi Loeb. And I have the opportunity to speak with him right now. And please welcome him to the show. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I have so many questions. And I'm glad that you could be here to answer them. And I always give this preface, and so much so that my viewers are sick of me saying it too, but I like to let my guests know in case they're not familiar with me. For the longest time, this channel was and still is. I cover pop culture, I cover movies, I cover television. I had stumbled upon a documentary on National Geographic, and it was called UFOs Investigating the Unknown. And I was just sitting around and said, yeah, sure, I'll watch it. Why not? I've always curious about this. And I had read the New York Times article and I had seen those things. I'm like, why not? And I thought it was more so of maybe, playing with the Steven Spielberg kind of imagination of it. But when I started to see people that were in pilots, high-level ranking officials, people like yourself, people that were, scientists, people were, again, from Harvard, and it blew my mind. I'm like, wait, there are so many more questions to be asked here. And the science of it all. But are you finding over the last year or so, obviously with Grush coming out and all these things, that there are more people that are asking you questions about these things, that there are more people that you never had ever heard talk about this subject? Are you finding it a lot more in the last year?
Yeah, definitely. But it's really not about people. It's about whether we have evidence for a neighbor, for any technological gadgets that may have been sent here from another civilization far away. And, for that, we just need to look out and check what is out there.
Yeah, that's a way to jump right into it. I'll tell you that, because there's a lot of people that will say, and as I see in this side of this community, where there's still this argument, and you look at, and this is kind of one of the main things I really want to dive in with you with AARO, and how AARO had just put out that report recently that said there's no evidence of extraterrestrial life, there's no evidence of NHI, there's none of this. Yet Sean Kirkpatrick, who you're very familiar with, there was the report that you and him wrote something together about alien motherships and other things of that nature. What's your stance on what AARO is doing at this current moment?
Well, so AARO was tasked with looking at past reports from military personnel, the U.S. government, about objects that with a nature that was not identified. And the problem with looking at past reports is, first of all, they're anecdotal. Military personnel happened to be at the right place at the right time, so something unusual.
Sure.
And you can't go back in time. You don't know how unusual it was, because the sky was not monitored for a long time in a systematic way. But nevertheless, this office in the Pentagon looked into past reports, and they say that 97% of them can be explained as drones, familiar objects, maybe airplanes, balloons, and only 3% are not fully understood. But to me, as a scientist, even though that may be satisfactory from a national security point of view, that most of the threats are recognized, as a scientist, even if 1 in a million happen to come from outside of this Earth, that would be big news. And I want to know also systematically what are the type of objects that appear in the sky in order to figure out how unusual it is to see something like that. And so that's why I'm leading the Galileo Project. We established a new observatory at Harvard University that monitors the sky 24/7. And by now we looked at 500,000 objects or so in the sky near Boston, Massachusetts, and so far we haven't seen anything unusual. But we're using machine learning software to figure out if there is anything other than birds, balloons, airplanes, drones in the sky. And we are now planning to build 2 more observatories, one in Colorado and the other one in Pennsylvania. So that's the way to proceed. The sky is not classified. We don't need to wait for the government to tell us what's out there.
Yeah.
And of course, if we find anything, since the Galileo Project is a scientific project, you will know about it. There is nothing to hide. The US government has a lot of classified information because that data was collected by classified sensors. And they don't want adversarial countries to be aware of the kind of sensors they're using, so they keep the data classified. We don't have that issue because our instruments were, bought off the shelf. We just ordered them online, and we assembled those observatories the way that any scientific project does its experimental work. And so hopefully we'll know more within a year or two, especially once we have these other observatories functioning in other locations, because you never know. Maybe near Boston there is nothing really unusual.
Well, I want to touch back on the Galileo Project because, when you pitched that to Harvard to start that, and is there any pushback on it? Is there any because I know you said the majority of it is to study the sky, but I think back to John Mack and what happened to John Mack when he was the idea that he was even investigating the idea of NHI at all. They wanted to get him out of there. Has any similar thing like that happened to you?
No. I mean, it's very different. What he was doing is he was dealing with people and who were claiming to have been abducted.
Yeah.
That's not the way physics is done. In science, or in physics in particular, we are using instruments. We're not using people to tell us what's out there, and it's very different. So, just like we use instruments to observe the sky and look for objects very far away, we can also use the same telescopes, the same cameras, looking at objects nearby. There is nothing really offensive in doing that.
Well, sure, but
so there is no reason for anyone to object. In fact, within a year, in 2025, there would be a new telescope looking at the sky in Chile. It's called the Rubin Observatory. It will have a camera that was just completed, the size of a person, with 3.2 billion pixels, 1,000 times more pixels than your cell phone camera. And it will survey the southern sky every 4 days. And, it could find unidentified objects. Now, would anyone say that if it sees anything unusual, would anyone say, oh, that should be, ignored? No, because if there is data, people will analyze it. And so what we are doing is collecting evidence, and I don't think there is any reason for anyone to object to that. Of course, some people are jealous that we're getting attention from the public, but that's a different matter. I don't see any pushback with respect to the scientific method, the way we are doing the science.
Sure. What about, so to touch on that, when you talk about other people, whether they're jealous or not wanting you to do what you're doing, there is rumors or someone had said to me, is it true that the fact that the FBI had actually investigated the Galileo Project and that they potentially confiscated data that you guys did have? Is that
No, it was not about data. I think if they looked into it, it's just to find out that, we're not doing anything beyond the science that we are openly talking about. And you can imagine people having other reasons for looking at the sky, and we don't. I mean, we just want to see if there, and we don't come close to strategic sites, or any important facilities. So we just want to figure out if there is anything unusual in the sky. These are unidentified anomalous objects.
Yeah.
So even what you see is what you get with this project, and maybe they looked into it just to make sure that that's the case. But at any event, I never heard from them about
Okay.
it. And if they looked, they would not. I mean, there is nothing to hide because this is just a scientific project.
Sure, and I think that's what kind of fascinates me in general. When you say trying to get the answers, trying to figure it out, because I've heard different opinions in general, what people think could be happening, these things, what they could be. And I saw an article recently, I actually covered it on my channel, and I wanted to ask you if you can clarify the recent article from the quotes you were talking about with portals. Because is it possible, as far as like with CERN and everything that they're doing in general, do you feel that is it possible they're not being 100% kind of transparent on what they do with the Large Hadron Collider?
No, I think obviously they will tell us if there is anything unusual, because so far the Large Hadron Collider just confirmed what we already suspected in elementary particle physics. They will tell us if there is anything new, obviously, because that will justify the investment of $10 billion in this experiment. And science is, not supposed to hide unusual data, anomalous data. But so far they haven't really announced new physics, something that was never expected. But they could find it because they reached the highest energy that the particles were smashed at so far, and there is a chance they will discover something completely new.
Do you think any of this, when it comes, because this is the stuff that really fascinates me, and I can't pretend that I understand a fraction of it, but the stuff that really makes me curious is when mentioning of bending space and time and the understanding of quantum physics and those, and how like the potential of portals and what these things could be. Do you have a overall theory? If someone said you have one theory of what you think this is, what do you believe it is?
Yeah, so I think it's quite possible that we had just 1 century of science and technology. If another civilization had much more than that, let's say 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years, they developed technologies that we cannot even imagine, that represent our future. And so instead of trying to imagine what they have based on our very limited knowledge, which many people do, instead of that, I just want to see if there is anything that is not familiar in the sky. So we know about our own technologies. We know about birds and all the biological creatures that are on Earth.
Right.
And my question is, do we have anything else? Okay, and so I'm not trying to guess what it might look like. I'm just trying to detect it. And so I think that's the best way to learn something new. And a lot of people, are either imagining things based on science fiction, which is all about our imagination, But it's not necessary, because I don't care what it is as long as it looks different from what we know about, and I just want to figure out what it entails once we find it. And then we might be surprised because it would look very different than what we expected.
I'm sure, but I have to say that I'm curious for myself because there are different theories of that. A, they are from different planets. B, they're from portals, different dimensions. C, they're not NHI. They're actually from other governments and things of that nature with technology that was recovered at whatever time.
So, I haven't yet seen any direct evidence for what the government may have, so I cannot comment on that. But once we find something unusual, we will look into it and study it and try to figure it out. So instead of guessing, it's all about the evidence. It's all about what we find. It's like a detective story, and it's better not to assume anything, because if you argue it should be this or that, you might be misled. It's sort of like, when we go on a date with someone, we can pretty much expect that someone to look like us because we share the same DNA of the human species. But if you are to meet someone from another star, there is nothing that is common, between you and that entity, and therefore it could be very different from what you might expect. There is no reason for us to expect anything. Let's just see what nature brings to our doorstep.
I think that's totally fair. And what I even hearing from you over the last like 10, 12 minutes, I seem that you definitely seem more careful than other scientists on the particular UFO phenomenon, but you do seem to be open to the possibility of claims made by, say, David Grush. Have you given any thought to any of those claims lately, and do you believe that these claims could be corroborated in the future?
Well, I spoke with him for an hour on a Zoom call just a few months ago, and so at the moment he did not reveal direct evidence for what he was talking about. He looked sincere to me, but he didn't show me or tell me about any specific evidence. But it may exist within government, and that's the fundamental question: does government officials hide something from us? And I cannot tell because I have never seen it. But it's possible that it's out there, and I very much wish the government would open it up, because otherwise I'm wasting my time. I can work on it for 2 decades, and if the government already has it, it would save me time. I can help them figure out what they have, but nobody showed it to me as of yet.
Is that a lot because of these kind of private companies that are kind of monopolizing this stuff? And is that also one of the main problems of why they're not giving someone like yourself a phone call?
Yeah, it's possible. I had someone who used to be a very high-level official at Lockheed Martin, and I said, "Do you believe what David Grush says?" And I expected him to say no, but he said, "Well, it's not necessarily wrong." So maybe there are some private companies that do have in their possession materials given to them by the U.S. government, and the reason for the government to do that is so that they, it will not be under their jurisdiction, and then the companies would like to get paid by the Department of Defense, and obviously they will take a while in figuring it out. But if you want the best scientists in the world to actually try and help them to figure it out, then you want it to be open. And there is no reason for the government to hide information that has to do with what happens outside the solar system. They should engage with their day job, which is national security. Anything beyond the solar system is my day job as an astronomer.
Well, don't you think that one of the reasons maybe that the covering up, at least the theory, is that, because I agree with you, I don't think that the science should be hidden if they have it. I think that should be something that's shared with all humanity in general. But one of the reasons maybe if they're hiding this thing since the 1940s is because of all the legality that could come with it and all the potential lawsuits. The lawsuits or people jail time, perhaps.
But think about Galileo or Nicolaus Copernicus, who realized that the Earth is not at the center of the solar system. And,
right.
Denying a fact like that didn't make sense legally. But the church did exercise political pressure on those individuals, and not revealing this because it went against the grain at the time. And but my point is that it's not a good practice to deny things that have to do, with the reality that we all share. And in this case, outside the solar system, if we have a neighbor, we better know about it. And it's not for the government to hide information about it from us. So I think it's for our benefit to be aware of what lies, to be aware that we are not at the center of the solar system, to be aware that there might be a neighbor, near us that we could learn from. We just, it makes no sense to hide the existence of a neighbor from your family. If you live in a house and the family is not aware of the neighbor, that makes zero sense, because at some point the neighbor will knock on the door, or the neighbor will affect your family life, and you want your family to be aware of that. So I just don't think it's good practice of anyone to hide scientific information like that. The only place where hiding information is perhaps justified is national security,
Sure.
where you are confronting threats from other nations. But here we are talking about something that has nothing to do with the fights that we have on Earth. That has to do with another completely different entity, and so I think everyone should be aware of that.
I feel like there's a lot of people that are on that same wavelength, and I even look at, say, Chris Mellon yesterday. I don't know if you saw the tweet
Yes, I
that he
did. I
released,
saw that. Yeah.
and that was a pretty. The way that I read that email, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or if you maybe read it the same way, but it looked like from the government official that he had this conversation with, it looked like that was a pretty much like kind of an admittance that there was indeed a crash retrieval program, and then there was indeed something that crashed in Arizona that they have.
Yeah, that was what was said, but at the same time, Mellon admitted that this person did not really see the direct materials
Okay.
or evidence. But nevertheless, it's not a completely hypothetical concept the way that AARO or other people within the Department of Defense refer to it. I mean, there were some people within government that said that there is nothing to this notion of that David Grush brought up. And so what Chris was saying is that he has some correspondence that supports the idea. I mean, it's not crazy that the government did have a program of this nature. But the question is, what is the material? What is the evidence? And I very much hope, this is something from the 50s, and it's about time, like we're talking about 70 years later now, and we should see it.
Oh, we should definitely see it. I mean, especially, I'm sure a man of science like yourself is probably drooling to see it. And then when it comes to, other things, and again, because like I said earlier, I'm newer to this, so if I get this wrong, please forgive me. But from some of the things that I've read about you is that you are in possession of some potential materials and things that you have found. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah. So about a decade ago, on January 8th, 2014. U.S. government satellites spotted a meteor that collided with Earth. That's an object roughly the size of a large watermelon that collided with Earth and was moving too fast to be bound to the sun by gravity.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interstellar meteor. We realized that based on the data that was publicly available from NASA. And then the U.S. Space Command confirmed that indeed the velocity measurement of this object indicated that it came from outside the solar system, that it was interstellar. So I led an expedition to the Pacific Ocean on June 14th to the 28th to the site of this fireball that was detected by U.S. government satellites. And they defined the region to within about 7 miles or so, and the ocean was 1 mile deep. And we used a sled that had magnets on both sides, and we dragged it back and forth 26 times over that region. And we recovered materials that about 10% of those molten droplets that we found had the composition that was never reported in the scientific literature, that does not resemble what you find on Earth, on the Moon, Mars, or asteroids. And so that, to us, indicates that it could potentially have originated from outside the solar system, irrespective of the measured velocity that the US government provided, but just based on the chemical composition of this material. And so now we are planning to go again and look for bigger pieces of the object, because they would tell us for sure if this was a rock or some Voyager-like meteor. If you imagine Voyager, our own spacecraft, colliding with a planet like the Earth, it would appear as a meteor of unusual material strength and unusual speed. And indeed, this object, this meteor, was moving faster than 95% of the stars near the sun, and was also of a very unusual material strength, tougher than even iron meteorites.
Okay.
And so the question is, what was it? And we hope to find bigger pieces. And that expedition that we are now starting to plan will cost about $7 million.
Wow.
And so I'm engaged now in seeking those funds because we need them in order to proceed. And it's an expensive expedition because we will use a remotely operated vehicle and a video feed to look at the big pieces that are on the ocean floor. So it's quite challenging, but we think we have the ship and the equipment that we need. It's just a question of funding at the moment.
And so you're pretty confident in exactly where to look in the ocean, obviously, with how vast it is.
Because we went there already, and we are basing it on what we found and on what the U.S. government told us.
Well, let's stick with the ocean, though, too, because as of recently, I've been getting more and more curious about that. I just recently had on Tim Gallaudet on the show, and we spoke for a while, and he kind of blew my mind when a lot of the stuff that I was talking about with him. And how much do you think is really under there? Like, because obviously the thing that you're looking for, but there's so many different reports and so much with the USOs in general of things going down there. Scientifically, do you think it makes sense that these things are in there as well as they are in the skies?
Yeah, in principle, you can think of liquid water as fuel, because you can break water molecules with sunlight. It's called electrolysis, and you basically break it into oxygen and hydrogen that make the water. And both hydrogen and oxygen can be used as fuel. And so there are good reasons for any advanced technology to look for places where liquid water exists so they can use it. And we haven't surveyed most of the oceans.
Right.
And some of the claims that came from military observers, people that saw unusual objects, involved objects that start in the air and then go into the water. And so the question is, what are these objects, and whether some of them have activities under the water? And so that's an open question.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, because is where there's a lot of those questions as far as like what is that, whether it's the particular meteorite that you're going after, or whether it is the stuff under the water, the stuff in the sky. One of the things I definitely wanted to talk to you about, that I know that you were part of the Mexico hearing when they showed those the Nazca mummies. I want to ask you a couple things here. The first is obviously what you think about those bodies that were presented, and if you were expecting that to happen in the first place, and your overall reaction to the event.
Yeah. So I had a lecture that I had to give immediately. I mean, that actually overlapped with the event, and I could participate only in the first 15 minutes of this event. And I didn't really know what happened after. So I gave a presentation of 15 minutes. I said I have to leave, and they presented those mummies after this. And so they didn't tell me ahead of time. And then after the fact, it's very likely that these were manipulated, that they were not, they were made of parts that are obviously from this earth. I didn't have a chance to examine them, but I didn't, I'm not into biology. And I know that there is a group of people now, a committee that went there to study those things.
Right.
So I would put a small likelihood on that. I mean, it would be much more convincing if the U.S. government, for example, had access to such bodies, like
exactly
in crash sites. So I'm waiting for that to come out, but not so much. Those things that were presented there could have been manipulated.
Well, there was a report. Did you see the report by Dr. McDowell? And who's an award-winning forensic scientist, and he had said that the mummies were indeed real. And if that is the case, if there's more reports like that, and I think that the Galileo Project more so is towards what's going on in the sky, but is that something that would even be, would you even consider joining the research effort if more people came on and said, this is real?
Well, the instruments that we are using are not suitable for that. So there are people, as you mentioned, that are experts on examining bodies, and it should be straightforward to tell if whatever is presented it came from this Earth.
Sure.
You can look at the radioisotopes and figure out if the age of the material is different than the age of the Earth. These are studies that cost money but can be done. And I hope someone who is an expert on studying biological, creatures and will do that. The Galileo Project is focused on physical objects, and so we are not so much into the living creatures.
I'm telling you, man, this is a fascinating interview, and I love talking to him. So before we keep going, I got to tell you guys about our friends over at Magic Spoon and PX1. So wonderful. I love them both. I've told you guys about them before. If you're brand new to the channel, then take a listen. I'm going to tell you, first of all, about Magic Spoon, because you guys know, and I got that yesterday. I'm so excited for somebody to reach out to me yesterday and told me how much they're loving Magic Spoon. And I'm so glad that you told me about Magic Spoon, because I absolutely love it. And I'm so glad that you do, because last night I got the new, they have like honeygram ones now, which is great, because I had a New Year's resolution to cut back on sugar, add more protein. I did it. And people love cereal. You get older, it's harder to do that just because there's so much sugar and kind of empty carbs. Well, Magic Spoon has everything. It's got the flavor that you love. It's got high protein, less sugar. They have cocoa. They have fruity, frosted peanut butter. I told you, I just had this new graham cracker thing that I love. 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, only 140 calories a serving. So good. High protein, and 0 sugar. It's amazing. If you go to magicspoon.com/bigthing and you grab a variety pack, and you can try it today, but you got to use our promo code. Use Big Thing at checkout, and you save $5 off your order. It's so amazing. They're so confident in it, by the way, and they should be. It's backed with 100% happiness guarantee. If you don't like it for any reason, they refund your money, no questions asked. So start your new protein diet today here with this stuff. It's a delicious bowl of high protein cereal. You go to magicspoon.com/bigthing. Use that code, Big Thing. Golfers, you know that PXG is on a mission to create the most high-quality, high-performance golf clubs in the game. Well, they're bringing the same passion for excellence to their new line of apparel, and I gotta say, they nailed it. I told Riley about this. Riley lost his mind. Riley was in the depths of having a new baby, but he was able to get some golfing in. I don't know how he did it, but he did it, and he loved it. He told me all about it. It was made with premium materials and technology designed for peak performance. These confidence-inspiring looks invite all-day play, taking you seamlessly from the course to the office to a night in the town. From golf trips to romantic getaways, these dynamic pieces add versatility and standout style to every event. PXG apparel has something for everyone. Pants, polos, sweaters, hats, quarter zips, joggers, jackets, skirts, everything that you want. I got this hat and this shirt, man. This shirt is slick. Love that shirt. It's my color too. I like that. So they're really comfortable. You guys know I like my hats. I like my black hats, and I like this hat. It's very comfortable, and I dig it. You'll see me wearing it a lot. It's great because they're designed for the course. They block out the sun. This shirt is really comfortable and perfect for the course. You can even wear it out. I will have meetings with this. I'll go to breakfast with this. Elevate your style game on and off the course with the PXG Spring Summer 2024 collection. You got to go to pxg.com/thebigthing. Again, pxg.com/thebigthing. We got to use that code, thebigthing. Get 10% off of all apparel. My golfing friends are losing their minds over this stuff. They're already using the code. You will too. So one more time, 10% off. Go to pxg.com/thebigthing and use that code, thebigthing. Obviously, there's just so much that is kind of comes at you. We just mentioned so many different aspects of this thing, whether it's bodies presented at a hearing, whether it's stuff under the ocean, whether it's meteorites that you're looking at just looking at the sky in general. There just seems to be a lot, and new claims coming every day. Did you see any of this stuff with the new potential whistleblower? It's got Jason Sands, I believe his name is. Did you see any of that, or you not even pay attention to that stuff?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay.
What did you do?
Well, it was this potential new whistleblower that James Fox, apparently, I haven't got a confirmation on this or not, but I think he's supposed to be in James Fox's new film, decided to do an interview, but in Twitter Spaces, and not on News Nation, not on anything, but like on one of like those Twitter Spaces. And he had a lot of wild claims, but said that there were a lot of people that he'd worked with, that he was part of the program, that he worked with David Grush, that he had worked with Lou Elizondo, that he worked with all these people. And there's been skepticism on it, but there hasn't been a full-on, no, that's not true. Leslie Kean was in there listening to it. So I wasn't sure if you had heard any of it yet and if you had an opinion.
No, that's very interesting. But I wonder if he mentioned those names, they can say if they know him. And
yeah,
yeah,
he did.
So it's not up to me to verify the authenticity. They should be able to tell us.
I do, though, and I mentioned it briefly. I want to get, and I would be mad at myself if I didn't go back to it, because I wanted to, as you mentioned, we were talking about AARO, but I want to specifically talk about Sean Kirkpatrick, because he's become a kind of polarizing figure, obviously, in this whole topic, and you know him pretty well. How did you first come to start working with Sean Kirkpatrick, and if you're exhausted by talking about this particular paper again, I understand, but I would really like to get a kind of clear understanding.
I have, as I said before, with me, what you see is what you get. I'm not hiding anything. He just told me that he is visiting the area and that he would be happy to meet with me. And so I said, sure, why? I'll be glad to meet you. That was when he was appointed as the head of AARO, and we corresponded after that, and that ended up in the write-up of this preprint that never got submitted for publication, because he just dropped out of the communication on that. And so altogether, it's really hard for me to interpret what happens within government, because they are an opaque organization. In science, things are more transparent, but I cannot really figure out what's going on behind the scenes in government, because some of the information they're dealing with is confidential. It's classified, and I don't have access to that. And so I just respond to what I see. And I noticed that he was drifting in the direction. Initially, he seemed to be quite open-minded when I met with him first, but then at the end of his term, he very strongly argued that there is nothing behind Grush's claim, and nothing that to support the government having evidence for something beyond this earth. And that sounded to me a little extreme, because even if AARO identified the 97% of all the objects that were classified as unidentified before, there is still 3%, which is quite a lot, actually. And as I said before, even if 1 in a million is from outside of this earth, that's big news. So, and we are looking at millions of objects right now with the Gallileo Project. So, it's really a subject that should be addressed scientifically. You can't make very strong statements the way he did.
Right.
That there is nothing out there, that he's sure that the government. And it's also possible that he doesn't know about some other work that was done elsewhere within government. That's possible. I just don't know. So instead of getting into this mess of figuring out what happens within government and waiting for the government to tell us what they know, I think it's much simpler to actually seek the evidence ourselves. If it's out there, we will see something.
I mean, I agree. It just like you said, it just seems like a strange kind of 180 where he wants to write this paper with you, and I'm curious to what his demeanor was when you guys were discussing this paper and discussing how it was and the beliefs that he had, and then to just say, nope, nothing there, nothing to see here. That's got to be, it sounds like birds in the ear, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me more like, there are all kinds of political pressures and other pressures that he was subjected to, but I don't really care about that. I just want to find evidence for anything beyond this earth. And I think on that, we should just be curious. We should not make strong statements. We should not be driven by politics. This science is, you just need to be curious. You just need to collect the evidence and, describe what you see, rather than pretend to know more than you actually know, which is what the adults in the room often pretend to do. And so politics and government is often about pretending to be the adult in the room, And I'm not pretending to do that. I'm, a curious farm boy. I'm just curious, and I just want to figure it out from a scientific perspective. And I have no other agenda.
Understood, and I think that's like I said, the science part of it is what really there's two parts of it that I'm attracted to: the science part of it, and the way that the government has actually. I'm not a government person, but I am actually impressed with the bipartisan nature of the way that people have come together in this topic to try to find out the truth. And it's got to. Yeah, go ahead, please.
On that, I would say that there are people within government that are curious. And if they are exposed to evidence that looks anomalous, they just want to know what it means. And I'm not surprised that some of them are curious. I visited the Capitol Hill for a completely different reason on another physics project, and some of those politicians approached me and said that we follow what you're doing. We are really curious about what you will find. And that's a sign of them behaving like kids. Like, let's be curious. Why do we always have to pretend to know the answer and to deny anything unusual? I mean, if you lose your curiosity, maybe you can promote yourself politically, but it's really not inspiring to most of us that want to know, whether we have a neighbor. That's all.
Of course,
I mean, why is that a difficult question to address? I mean, it's also true within the scientific community that a lot of people have strong opinions and they resist any study on this subject. Right. And I have to face those doubters as well. And they're very vocal. And I just say, forget about pretending, and let's just stay curious and collect data. That's what science is about.
Well, that's why I asked my initial question about if you got any pushback, not just so much about, the fact that you guys, I think you explained it perfectly, what the Gallileo Project does is looking in the sky, that it's just the scientific experiment to where Harvard goes, yeah, it makes sense. They're looking at the sky. They find something, that's not a big deal. But I meant because you are pretty linked into this community. As I said, how I heard you about whether it's that paper with Kirkpatrick, whether it's the materials that you found of what you believe, you've been outspoken about that. Yeah. That's more so of the stuff I meant, that if anybody was saying, hey, maybe you lean back on talking about the alien stuff.
No, actually, last week I was in Vancouver, Canada, where I gave a TED talk. It was the TED conference. And, when I arrived to the green room, I heard a voice behind me saying, I can't believe that I'm with Avi Loeb in the same room. And that was Barry Weiss. She's a free speech advocate. I admire what she does. She's very eloquent. And I've never met her before. And I just realized, through that exchange and through many other encounters there, a lot of people are really fans of this line of research. And there were dinners organized by some very wealthy individuals that really are fascinated by this research. And so I do find that people who are curious are, these are the people I want to have as friends. Yeah. I don't care about those people who pretend to be the adults in the room, because they just pretend. They would argue during the days of Copernicus and Galileo that, we are at the center of the universe because everyone knows that. And why would you doubt that? And, and I was invited by the Polish government just a few months ago to celebrate 550 years to the birth of Nicolaus Copernicus, who realized that the sun is at the center of the solar system. And the way he figured it out is because the church, he was a priest, and the church at the time wanted to forecast when Easter takes place. And they had difficulties because they had a model where the earth was at the center and they got Easter wrong. And so he said, well, okay, let me look at the data. And he realized that if you put the sun in the middle, then you get Easter right. And he was honest enough, even though he was a priest, right, to give this model to the church. And the church used it and said, thank you very much, but we will ban your book. And it was a forbidden book until the 19th century, because they wanted to maintain the view that the earth is at the center. And, I was there and I gave a lecture, a keynote lecture about the next Copernican revolution, when we would realize that we are not the smartest, that we are not at the intellectual center of the universe. And right. So this is just to tell you that there are lots of people out there, and they actually gave me a copy of Copernicus book that you can see behind me on the left. And there is a large community of people who are curious and want to hear more about it, and are very much supporting what this scientific research program that I'm following. So of course I have to withstand the pushback from some people, but it's worth it,
Yeah.
because one day we might find very clear proof for that.
Well, I think that so is that clearly that's why you're in this. You're in this to make sure the curiosity of it, as you've explained, but it's also because if you have that breakthrough, if you're in the epicenter, the fact of showing that this is scientifically being able to prove that, to show the next evolution of human beings learning these types of things. Why wouldn't you want to be in the middle of that and to see kind of pushback from what you just explained? But do you also think that that's also linked for the idea of maybe it would potentially turn religion on its head in a certain aspect, and that's what
Right.
people are so scared of as well?
Well, I don't think it should be something we are scared of, because you know in the old days the religion gave people a sense of an entity that is superhuman, that is more capable than us, and that could be replaced by a very advanced scientific or technological civilization that is far more advanced than we are. What they produce may look like miracles to us, the way that the burning bush that was never consumed appeared to Moses in the Old Testament. So what I say is that it will bring us a sense of modesty, that we are not really at the top of the food chain in the universe, which we prefer to believe in, right? We prefer to believe that we're the center of the universe, that we are the most important, the smartest species that ever existed. But all evidence points the other direction, that we are not at the center of the universe. By that, we are convinced now, and also that we probably have a smarter neighbor, because we had science and technology only for 1 century, and most stars existed billions of years before the sun, and they could have developed technologies that are far more advanced than we have. And so I'm not saying we know that for sure, but there are hundreds of billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Let's be modest and just check out without having a strong opinion to start with. When people say that, where is everybody, like Enrico Fermi said, or extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, in both cases they're not really seeking the evidence. And that's the mistake, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It takes a lot of effort to actually collect the evidence, go to the Pacific Ocean, collect the materials.
Right.
And it's much easier to have an opinion and criticize, that we all know that. And I think the general public appreciates the work being done. And eventually, if we find something, that would become a cornerstone. It will change everything.
Well, let's stay with that then. When it comes to, I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked Tim Gallaudet. Do you believe, and I guess it's a different question somewhat, because I asked as far as disclosure goes, I know that's not really necessarily what you're going for as much as the discovery and the science of it. So let me go more on the science side of it. Do you believe that in our lifetime that there will be a breakthrough in science, and that this will be a provable thing, that it won't be a question anymore?
Yeah, so this is a path that was not taken, searching for objects that came from outside the solar system. Only over the past decade we had such objects discovered. The meteor that I mentioned in 2014, there was Oumuamua, a large object that was identified by astronomers in 2017, and these are the first objects from outside the solar system over the past decade only. So this is a path that was not taken before, and there is a chance for low-hanging fruit. If there is a lot of space trash out there, it kept accumulating over billions of years, just like plastics in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And all we need to do is check the objects that come our way, that enter our backyard from outside the solar system. And they don't need to be functional devices. They can be just space trash, like plastic bags that you find in the ocean. You might say, okay, well, why is that exciting? Because it tells you that they are not natural. If you find a plastic bag, it says that someone threw it away, and it ended up in the ocean. And the same is true if we find another Tesla Roadster car, the way that the SpaceX launched as a dummy payload on the Falcon Heavy in 2018. If we find other cars that were sent from other planets far away, I don't care that they are not functional cars. Like, I don't care. I mean, their trash is our treasure.
Right.
In some way. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's why I'm sure that if there was evidence of actual confirmation of whether it's reverse engineering or the crash retrieval, someone like yourself would be kind of itching to get in that room to be able to be one of the people to get in there and study a little bit more of it. I'm sure that you've thought about that.
Yeah, and that would make my day, obviously. And I believe that since we are taking a path that was not taken, we will find low-hanging fruit, maybe within the coming years. So just stay tuned. And I say that as long as, of course, the work will be funded, that the scientific search that I'm conducting will receive the funding that it needs. Of course, if you don't invest any funds in the search for evidence, you will not find anything.
Agreed. And I know we got to go in a second here, but so I wanted to ask you two more things here. And the first is, have you had a UAP experience, whether it's anything that you felt that is something I can't explain?
No.
Okay.
But I did have dinner with a number of people that I respect and that look very reliable, who told me that over the past couple of decades they had such experience. And these were serious people.
Okay.
And I believe them. And they saw something really unusual. I haven't seen anything like it myself.
Okay. Last question is to jump back on the kind of the portals and the. I assume, is that linked into anti-gravity and how that works? Do you believe in the anti-gravity studies and the stuff that happened with Townsend Brown and things of that nature? Is that something that you think ties into a lot of this?
Well, we know that the expansion of the universe is accelerating, and so that's like having repulsive gravity. And Einstein's theory of gravity admits that if you have energy of the vacuum, it produces repulsive gravity. We see that in the expansion of the universe. So if there is a way of engineering that and creating somehow repulsive gravity, that can be used for propulsion. We just don't know, but it's definitely a possibility.
So sticking with that, and I'm not asking you to say whether or not you think this video is real or fake, but more so on the science of if it's possible after what you just said. I've been paying attention a lot lately to Ashton Forbes. I don't know if you know the name,
No.
but he's talking a lot about have you seen the videos on the Malaysia flight, the MH370 videos?
No.
So the video is essentially that one of the theories is that this flight, you're familiar with the flight and what happened to with the flight itself, and there's video that has not since been debunked yet, but there's videos that look like potential orbs that in the thermal video itself goes around, circles the plane, pops, disappears. Now, some people have called it, could be CGI, could be somebody, who's just really good at that stuff. No one's come forward and claimed it yet. But mine is less of do you think the video is real, because you haven't even seen it. The question is there, with this type of stuff that you're talking about, scientifically possible that with that kind of gravity, that type of thing could happen?
Yeah, for sure. But the fundamental question is whether these are drones produced by some other entity that, as what we need to do is exclude the possibility that anything we see came from either humans or nature on Earth. That's the task. So if you see something unusual, the question is, could it be human-made? And to figure it out, you need as much data as possible. And so that's the way we should think. First of all, if we see something, let's rule out what it couldn't be. That's what Sherlock Holmes, the fictional detective, used to be. He used to argue that if you rule out all possibilities, whatever remains must be the truth. And so when we see something unusual, we should just follow Sherlock Holmes and rule out that it's a drone, rule out that it's an airplane, that it's a bird, or anything that we are familiar with, and whatever remains must be the truth.
Sir, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me here today. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you're doing for science, and good luck to you. And I look forward to hearing more about what if you get that funding to see what else you find in the ocean.
Thank you so much. I'll do my best.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. There you have it. That was it. I know I was fascinated by just listening to that guy, so I'm hoping that you guys were just as fascinated for the stuff that we got in that interview. As I mentioned in the intro, if you like this interview, share it, take clips of it, post it on social media, talk about it. Subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 200,000 subscribers. Go to the Down to Earth channel. Go over there. Spread the word. Let's get people talking, whether you are a skeptic, whether you're a, I don't know, I'm not sure, or whether you're a staunch believer. Put your comments in there. Let's have a conversation overall. So, thank you to Avi Loeb for joining me. Thank you to our wonderful sponsors, AG1, Mack Weldon, Magic Spoon, and of course, PXG. So if you want to help out the show, you can help the show out. Please get one of our sponsors. You get something for yourself. I cannot stress how much it helps that when you get something for yourself, it helps this show out and supports this show. Thanks for joining us again. We'll see you on the flip side. See you next week. Appreciate it. See you on the flip side.